Well, hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's great to be with you on this Friday, April 29th, and here is some of what we're talking about tonight. A Marine Corps veteran has been killed in Ukraine, but the U.S. has no official boots on the ground in this war. Why are foreign fighters taking up arms to defend Ukrainians? Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter prompted lots of questions, including yours. Our experts will answer some, including this one. Does kicking someone off Twitter violate their First Amendment rights? Plus, today marks 30 years since race riots consumed Los Angeles over the beating of Rodney King. We will look back with someone who endured that upheaval as a child. And you might think of it like 23andMe for your pet. We'll check out new findings from a crowdsourced animal science project about how different dog breeds really behave. People in Kyiv are cleaning up after a series of overnight missile strikes. Officials say the attack killed at least one person. Thousands have died in this war, and today a former U.S. Marine is among them. Willie Joseph Cancel, a 22-year-old native of Orange County, New York. He leaves behind a wife and their 7-month-old son. Mr. Cancel's family says he was fighting in Ukraine as part of his work with a private military contractor. The White House has not confirmed his death, but officials say they had seen the reports and they're warning Americans not to go to Ukraine.
We know people want to help, but we do encourage Americans to find other ways to do so rather than traveling to Ukraine to fight there. It is a war zone. It's an active war zone.
Meanwhile, the mayor of Mariupol is calling the situation there hell on earth. Soldiers and civilians are still holding out at a steel plant there. The mayor says they're running out of basic necessities. Also, a senior Pentagon official says that Russia seems to be days behind schedule in taking territory in eastern Ukraine. That's despite a recent strategy shift aimed at doing just that. And all of this comes as billions of dollars of weapons have started flowing into Ukraine. Yesterday, President Biden asked Congress for another $33 billion worth. Congress also approved a lend-lease program that would let the president send more aid at his discretion. NBC's Cal Perry joins us now from Kyiv. Cal, what more do we know about Mr. Cancel and the role of Americans on the ground in Ukraine?
So the details of his death are still very unclear, including the location and where exactly he was fighting. We had the president tell our Kristen Welker, quote, it's very sad he left a baby at home. The larger question here, and the one you're asking, I think is the appropriate one, which is the role of foreign fighters and the role that Americans have within those foreign fighters that are fighting here in Ukraine. I've interviewed Americans who've come to the front to fight the Russians, and the question you ask them is why? You know, this is not your war. Why are you here doing this? The answer is often to defend democracy. Now, in the case of the individual who was killed that we found out about today, this former Marine, it seems like he was fighting for a private security firm. Well, that's, the definition of a mercenary, and there are a number of Americans who are here doing that. All of this plays in, I think, partly to what the Russians are saying and accusing everybody of, which is that this is a proxy war, that when you look at the weapons that the Americans are sending into this country, you talked about that $33 billion land lease program, that follows $3.7 billion of immediate lethal military aid to this country. You sort of see the broader picture and what the Russians are accusing folks of here of a proxy war. That certainly seems to be part of what is playing out here on the ground. When you push Ukrainian officials on how many foreign fighters there are, where are they in the country, what you get is there are foreign fighters from 27 different nations, but they don't want to get into the overall numbers or where these individuals are. The other thing that they don't want to talk about is when will that invitation end? Now, look, this war is still very much ongoing, but I think there are very real questions about what happens once this war is done with all the foreign fighters who are in the country, Joshua.
The mayor of Mariupol said today that the number of wounded inside that steel plant is up to about 600 people. What more do we know about the situation there and whether there's any chance of an evacuation?
And among those numbers, it seems like 600 civilians wounded and another 600 Ukrainian Marines somewhere in that compound wounded as well. There has been talk in the last 24 hours about a rescue mission. And we heard that yesterday, Thursday, it's Friday morning here. Yesterday on Thursday here, there was an attempt at some kind of a rescue mission, but the fighting was so fierce, the shelling was so bad in and around that location, which you see on your screens there now, that it had to be called off. That something at the last minute had to be called off because of that fighting. The Ukrainians do take a lot of pride when they tell us that they've held on to this area in Mariupol, and they say that they're keeping Russian forces from deploying to the east. But the reality is, while we don't have a good indication of the casualty numbers yet, it's quite likely tens of thousands of civilians have died in that city. And depending on how this sort of plays out with this compound, with these people under siege, those numbers could be far worse. This I still think could go either way. It's possible the Ukrainians could counterattack and break some of those folks out. But unfortunately, I think it's equally possible that the Russians continue that assault, and there's a lot of fear that ground could be lost, Joshua.
With regard to the assault, can you clarify a bit more, just give it a little more context in terms of what the U.S. government means when it says Russia looks like it's days behind? We had kind of had this understanding that they've already taken Crimea, they were going to make their way in from eastern Ukraine, try to create a land bridge between the two, kind of around the Sea of Azov, and that would give them a stronger base of operations to push west. What more do we know about that assessment in terms of them being behind in that effort?
Well, and the Russians had kind of set the bar and well, they put the goalposts in, if you like, on this sort of what they called, quote, phase two. They reassessed their war plan and publicly said phase two is going to be that land bridge in the southern part of the country and these territories in the east, Donetsk and Luhansk. When you look at the American battle assessment, it talks about sort of methodical progress, but not perhaps as much as the Russians would like to make. This is the Russians surrounding Mariupol. This is sort of the localized map of the city where they have this city run. But if you sort of look broadly at the country, in the eastern part of the country, you have what is becoming a war of attrition. There you go. That eastern part of the country, Donbass, all the way into the south there. You have, I think, static front lines where we're hearing a lot of shelling. And again, the Ukrainians asked specifically for long-range artillery from the Americans. That's why they got these howitzers. We heard today about half the howitzers are already in the country. That's in many ways standoff artillery to try to keep the Russians where they are. Part of that assessment, I think, is taking into account that the Russians have not moved very much like they expected to, like they had hoped to. The other place that they're getting jammed up is outside Odessa. They'd like to create that land bridge from the south. This is video of those howitzers, Joshua, by the way. These howitzers fire 40 kilometers into Russian lines. The defense minister said that these howitzers could be a real difference maker in the east. We're starting to hear that that's in fact the case. And again, if you could stop the Russians where they are and you can stop the advancement, one of the things that allows you to do, if you're the Ukrainian military, is to continue to get those weapons behind you, to continue to sort of supply those frontline troops. It is one of the reasons the Americans have put out this battle assessment. But again, we should caution our viewers here. This war is so fluid. If Mariupol falls and the Russians are able to redeploy those forces to the east, it's possible we could be talking about them making gains in the coming days or weeks, Joshua.
Thank you, Cal. NBC's Cal Perry starting us off again tonight from Kyiv. Now, as we've mentioned, Russian forces are leaving parts of Ukraine devastated. Some Ukrainians are returning home now to find their towns destroyed. Others are seeing surrounding areas turned into battlefields. From our partners at Sky News, correspondent Alex Rossi has more.
With a military guide, we enter the small town of Bavinkovo. Heavily fortified, this once bucolic community is the next target of Putin's war machine. Thousands of Russian soldiers are heading this way, a maneuver the Kremlin hopes will cut off the Donbass. The Russian front line is just over the brow of that hill, and there is very heavy fighting there at the moment. As we drive, we pass smashed up houses. Only a few people remain. In the central square, Mikola, who tells us he's not scared, takes us to where the last bombs landed. There's another massive crater in the road here, another strike from a rocket. And over here, this building, it's the library, and it's still burning. Everything here has been destroyed. The books turned to cinders and ash.
Оголошується, що ми нікуди по мирних не стріляємо. Ми робимо точечні удари, точечні. Куди точечні? В бібліотеку? Який? Отам перед пам'ятником. Це точечний називається.
We carry on up the road, reaching a freshly dug defensive position. Soldiers repair tanks they'll need in the coming fight. The front looks and feels like a war from another century, a conflict the world thought it would never see again on European soil.
Ну, як вам сказати, танки вони завжди були, так скажете, дуже важливі якраз. Це одна із самих бойових єдиниць техніки української армії якраз, і те, що вони... Артилерія, це, звісно, добре якраз, але вона іздалека якраз накриває. Танки, вони ж для ближнього бою, те, що танки, вони захищають піхоту.
Across these positions, there are now hundreds of meters of trenches. A labyrinth of protection where the army has laid down nests of weapons. The Ukrainians are extremely well dug in to their positions. In many places, it's going up behind you now. And as we film, rockets streak overhead. It is a deadly fight where long-range artillery will be decisive. In this maze, there are many deep bunkers, sanctuaries from the incoming fire. Many of the men have been living here, like this, for months. Yevgen shows us the German-made anti-tank weapons he'll be firing.
Заряджаємо, прицілюємося, стріляємо.
Western arms are flooding into this war, and it's why the Kremlin claims it's now in a proxy fight with NATO and the West.
Якщо до 200 метрів танк розриває, з 800 метрів можна навести шуму. Танк збиває добре.
So many of these towns and villages have been devastated by the fighting. This was once a school. But in this Russian invasion, now a slow slugging match of attrition and firepower, nothing is sacred. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Eastern Ukraine.
Still to come, free speech and an expensive takeover. Elon Musk is preparing to buy Twitter. Our experts will answer your questions about the deal and what it could mean for online expression. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Tonight, we're going to answer your questions about Twitter going private. This week, the company accepted Elon Musk's buyout offer. Much of his stated reason for the takeover and the debate surrounding it has to do with free expression. Mr. Musk tweeted his view of free speech, quote, "By free speech, I simply mean that which matches the law. I am against censorship that goes far beyond the law. If people want less free speech, they will ask government to pass laws to that effect." He went on to write, quote, "Therefore, going beyond the law is contrary to the will of the people," unquote. Many of you have sent in questions and stories about Twitter's takeover, as well as some very mixed opinions. Dr. Granny tweeted, "One person should not have this much power. I think we need more moderation, not less." Michael left a comment for us on YouTube. Michael writes, "I am happy that he is taking it over and applying wide rules of acceptance to it so that all people can be seen for who they truly are. It also allows people to incriminate themselves publicly." And we got a few voicemails, including this one that Justin left in our inbox.
Who is it to decide what the truth is? So that's where Elon Musk comes in to say, listen, we can have adult conversations about this. There doesn't have to be hate speech or anything else. We're all adults. Let's talk like adults.
Thanks to everyone who shared their comments. We'll get to some more of those and to your questions now with NBC News legal analyst Barbara McQuaid, a law professor at the University of Michigan. and CNBC contributor Tim Higgins, a tech reporter with the Wall Street Journal. Good to have you both with us, and I wonder if we might start with an email from Sarah that deals with how Twitter under Elon Musk might address different kinds of accounts and information. Sarah emailed, will Musk allow anonymous and unverified accounts? Anonymous accounts are synonymous with fake accounts and bots. These are tools for spreading misinformation, disinformation, and bullying in the public square. Let Twitter enable free speech such that real people have one account and one voice each. On the other hand, in countries without free speech and First Amendment rights, for example, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and China, would Twitter allow anonymous accounts? Or how would he protect the identities of people at risk for political persecution? What would be the privacy policy and terms of service regarding the identity of an account owner? Tim Higgins, let me start with you on that note and how Elon Musk might deal with free speech and free expression, considering different countries have different rules.
Yeah, that question is a great question because it underscores how complex of a swamp that he's jumping into when you start looking at the fact that Twitter goes beyond the U.S. This is a global product. It has to deal with global laws and regulations, and all of this is very complex. One of the things we do know that Elon has said is he wants to verify all the humans, whatever that means. We're not quite sure yet. And also, how would he go about doing that? Because that can be very complex and time consuming. So it's one thing to say, verify the humans and follow the local laws. It's another thing to actually put those practices in place because it can be very complex.
Professor McQuaid, what about this free speech First Amendment aspect? I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and we'll get to some of this in a minute, about censorship on Twitter and violating people's First Amendment rights. But the First Amendment doesn't protect you on Twitter. They're not bound by it the way that, say, a public university like the University of Michigan would be bound by the First Amendment, right?
Absolutely right. Twitter is a private company, and so therefore not bound by the First Amendment. And in fact, it's that legal status that allows them to impose those terms of service and community standards. And I think that when Elon Musk talks about wanting to promote free speech, what he's suggesting is that he would remove those kinds of restrictions. He's not required to do it by the First Amendment. And so he says, we're going to remove all those restrictions to the fullest extent of the law, and people can say whatever they want. So it's true freedom of speech. And I think he ought to be careful what he wishes for there, because sure, a place to share opinions and viewpoints is a wonderful thing. But as all of us have seen, it also leads to disinformation and harassment and threats and other kinds of things. So I think a world without rules is going to prove to be one that is not one that is so ideal. And I think he may be daring Congress to come up with some rules. If he won't impose rules as terms of service himself, then I think he's going to force the hand of the American people through their votes to ask Congress to put rules in place to avoid those bad things like harassment and threats of violence.
And before I get to the next comment, Professor, we should be clear. In his tweet, he said by free speech, he means that which matches the law. And in the United States, speech is not absolute. Like, there are certain things that you could say or express that are not protected by the First Amendment. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't protest in the middle of somebody's house just because you have First Amendment rights. There are all kinds of things that the First Amendment does not protect, even if you want to say them.
That's right. Threats, number one, communicating a threat in interstate commerce is a federal offense. It's also a civil offense. A civil claim can be brought if you defame somebody. So if you use Twitter to say things that were knowingly false about people, that could be a basis. So the one thing that Twitter and other service providers benefit from is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which gives them immunity from lawsuits for these kinds of things. The law is there to encourage innovation, but it has also allowed platforms to just throw up their hands and say, it's not our problem. If people want to say these things, it's on them. They're the ones who might be liable or for a crime or for a lawsuit, not us. We just provide the platform. And I think that's the model that he tends to be favoring.
Tim, let me get to another tweet from a viewer with regard to the future of this deal. They asked, why would Musk risk further scrutiny by Congress? What about the steps required to make this a done deal going forward?
Yeah, we expect it'll take another few months as they finalize it all. But one of the things that Elon Musk has going in his favor is that he's not a big tech company. He's not Google. He's not Facebook. He's not trying to buy something that might get antitrust scrutiny. This is a very rich man deciding he wants to buy something with the money that he has. So that kind of a challenge is probably not there for him. That should make this a lot easier to do. The real risk, I think your reader or your viewer is alluding to, is that this is going to introduce him to all sorts of new scrutiny on Capitol Hill, where there's a long history of CEOs who have run these social media companies over the last few years being taken before committees and facing very hard questions from both sides of the aisle as they try to navigate this very complex world.
How do you think that's going to play out if he does have to deal with regulators? I mean, today, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Tired of having to collectively stress about what explosion of hate crimes is happening because some billionaire with an ego problem unilaterally controls a massive communication platform and skews it because Tucker Carlson or Peter Thiel took him to dinner and made him feel special," unquote. That's a tweet from AOC. In response, Mr. Musk tweeted, "Stop hitting on me. I'm really shy." Blush emoji. Like, she is on the committee that regulates Wall Street, the House Financial Services Committee. I'm just wondering, Tim, where this is going to go. He seems to be kind of enjoying the game of this whole process.
Right. This is classic Elon Musk in that he, where a typical CEO might try diplomacy, try to work well with lawmakers, with regulators, he's going to punch back in the face and try to do it harder than he got it. And it's all about defiance, and that has long been the case. And so, but that's been one thing when it's been the car company. That's been one thing when it's been the rocket company. He's sparred with his regulators there. But social media companies have become this political hot button on both sides, and he is stepping into the middle of this. And it is going to be a kind of a world of pain that he's not accustomed to, dealing with just car regulators who are trying to make sure the cars are safe.
I will say, though, Professor McQuaid, that the left-right dichotomy has gained Elon Musk some supporters on the political right with regard to this whole deal. Here is what Steve left in our inbox.
The media, mainstream media, leftist media, seems to be portraying this as, Elon Musk wants to allow some sort of like white supremacy or something like this to dominate Twitter. It's not that at all. What I look at it as is, narratives and facts that are inconvenient to power or to establishment narratives that may have their own incentives and conflicts of interest are being censored from social media.
Steve, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Professor, what about that? This idea that Twitter is being used to kind of create a broader conversation than a network, a big company like ours, might otherwise allow, and that for that reason this deal has some merit that maybe some political forces don't want to see come to fruition.
I suppose there has always been the suspicion that there's censorship going on that is directed toward one particular political voice or another. But I think that the concern that perhaps progressives have is that they are more likely to be the targets of vitriol, of hate speech, of harassment, of threats on social media. For those who are white male establishment figures, they probably have not experienced that sort of kind of abuse on Twitter or elsewhere. And so I think that's where some of this concern is all about. But I think that there really are two choices here. Elon Musk can open up the floodgates and let people say whatever they want, which could lead the marketplace to just move to a different platform. Or I think that if we see a problem with disinformation and violence and threats and other kinds of things occurring on the platform, I think he is asking for Congress to impose rules, just as we have with broadcast media and others, to impose regulations that say what you can and can't say. And so it isn't a viewpoint censorship so much as it is community standards about the kinds of when speech becomes conduct through threats and harassment, I think is where the current community standards draw the line. And I think that if Elon Musk won't do it, we will see a push for Congress to do that.
And I think there is a conversation to be had about who gets to speak where. I mean, there is a difference between freedom of speech and freedom of reach. You are perfectly entitled to say what you want to say. I don't owe you a platform, and I don't have to listen. So I think that conversation is one that's going to have to evolve. Tim, before we go, one last email. Adrian gave her prediction for this. Adrian wrote, I believe Elon Musk will keep Twitter for no more than 2 years, then sell it to Donald Trump. Tim, is there a possibility that this is going to end in a way that none of us really foresees?
It's hard to predict the future with Elon Musk, but we know that it'll be pretty filled with drama over the next few months and possibly years. And that's part of why he has so many supporters. That kind of drama is authentic to a lot of people. They buy into what he is saying, and that's why he's been able to build a lot of support using Twitter as that tool over the years.
Law professor Barbara McQuaid, Wall Street Journal tech reporter Tim Higgins, we appreciate you answering some questions for us tonight. Thank you both very much. 30 years later, it seems we're all still just trying to get along. But nothing like what happened after a California jury acquitted the officers who beat up Rodney King. That ruling set off days of deadly riots in Los Angeles and a national debate on police brutality. We will look back at a racial fault line under the Rodney King riots just ahead. Stay close. America has had some heavy debates about race, justice, and policing. Today marks 30 years since those debates took on a new dimension after the beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles. On this date in 1992, a jury acquitted all of the officers of assault charges. Mr. King had been arrested after a high-speed chase. The arrest happened just over a year prior. A resident near the scene caught the beating on tape. Mr. King's injuries were quite severe: a broken leg, a fractured cheekbone, and 11 broken bones at the base of his skull. Within hours of the officers being acquitted, Los Angeles exploded in anger and fire, and those fires burned for 6 days. Thousands of federal troops were deployed. By the time the violence ended, 63 people were dead. More than 2,000 were injured. The city of Los Angeles suffered at least $1 billion of damage, and Rodney King had said those now famous words at a press conference during the rioting. Can we all get along? Some things have changed since then. The George Floyd case and the conviction of Officer Derek Chauvin are one example. But the issues never went away. And some of the scars from the LA riots have healed, but remained. Joining us now is Helena Khoury, a writer based in Los Angeles. The LA Times just published her essay about how the riots affected her mixed-race family. Ms. Rhee, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Hi, Joshua. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Now, you were just a kid when the riots happened, and you are part of a family that is mixed race, that has Black and Korean in the family line. Talk about how that cultural fault line began to kind of take on new meaning after the verdict.
Well, it was a really tricky situation for my family because we have both Black and Korean family members, and the racial strife was centered between those two groups in Los Angeles. And so when the riots broke out, it was just a really difficult time in my family. For instance, the article centers around me and my cousin, and already we were experiencing a rift in the relationship as I became more involved in Korean American organizations and she was more involved in her Black organizations. And the riots just kind of splintered our communications. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think our relationship repaired, quite frankly. And unfortunately, she died early of a heart condition, so that we never had that difficult conversation. We never had the opportunity. And that's something I still regret to this day.
Yeah, you say at the end of your piece, and I'm so sorry that you never had a chance to close that loop with her, but you write at the end of the piece that you wish you could tell her, I will never be you, nor will you ever be me, but love is a bridge that can close the gulf between us. Let's meet halfway. How well do you think that Angelenos have done since the Rodney King riots in trying to meet each other halfway and trying to see one another and love one another despite these divisions?
I remember right after the riots when Los Angeles was trying to repair itself, there were so many efforts to bring the two groups together in public discourse. And also, I was interning at a museum, the Los Angeles County Museum, for a while. And I remember there was a Korean exhibit, and I was tasked with walking African-American children from Compton through that exhibit. And so there were these remarkable efforts, and we've come such a long way. You would walk through the streets of Koreatown today and not even know that half the shops were burned to the ground. We've come so far, but there's so much more to do. When I first learned about the George Floyd murder, I was thinking, this reminds me so much of 30 years ago. This reminds me of the racial strife that this country has already gone through so many times. Can we please move beyond that? And so, you know, we have to work on this daily. Every day we have to work on this.
Elaborate on that a bit in terms of the racial strife, because there was a study that came out from Loyola Marymount's Center for the Study of Los Angeles that shows that the concern among Angelenos over the likelihood of civil unrest is basically where it was in the years right after Rodney King. Back in '97, when the survey launched, and they do it every 5 years, 65% of people said that they thought it was likely there'd be another outbreak before too long. This year, it was 68%. It had dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped, and then in the last few years shot up very sharply until now we're kind of back where we were in '97. Why is that? What do you think's going on?
I can believe that. I mean, the pandemic's been so hard for everyone, and also everything that's happened in this country with George Floyd, for instance. I think the stress levels and the anger levels can get high. And let's be real, Los Angeles has a traffic problem and a growing homeless problem. And so anger levels are pretty darn high among my neighbors. And so it's also tricky because Los Angeles is a melting pot of cultures. There are so many different pockets of different cultures coexisting. And so that lends itself to not just beauty, but also lots of opportunities for miscommunications and cultural misunderstandings. For instance, during the riots, I remember a lot of my Korean American friends, their families had shops that were located in Black communities. And a lot of the racial strife came because there were so many miscommunications. The Korean shop owners weren't fluent in English. The Black customers often saw them as rude or inconsiderate, or perhaps the face of oppression. And so this frustration had been building up. And so, Joshua, what you say about those frustrations building up yet again, I can completely believe that. That's why I really feel like it's hard work that we have to do every day, and try to understand where people are coming from. Because a lot of times we all have baggage and backgrounds that other people just can't see on the surface. And so we have to communicate better.
To that end, with regard to baggage, you write in the LA Times piece, throughout my childhood, my dad was always reminding me that any racism we faced in America was mitigated by the fact that Black people had already endured far worse. They had suffered and fought for the civil rights that all Americans enjoyed. I got to let you go in a second, but I wonder what your perspective is in terms of what it's like for you as a Korean American woman in America today. I think we've got these kind of split screens, right? We've got this tremendous rise in anti-Asian violence, including in parts of California. And then we've got this rise in interest in Korean culture, whether it's, you know, people who stan Aquafina or binge Squid Game, or they can't get enough of BTS. Like, there's just kind of an awareness of Korean culture in different ways now, and also this violence in the U.S. How do you see the future as it relates to communities in the Asian diaspora, especially with the legacy of Rodney King 30 years on? How do you see it going forward?
Yeah, it's a really interesting duality, but I am so appreciative of the increased representation in media of Asian Americans, of minorities. I think it really helps to get our faces and our voices in the forefront. I'm a children's book author, and there's been such a huge push for diversity in children's books, and I think that's really changing the tide of racism in this country, or at least I hope so.
Helena Khoury, I appreciate you making time to share your remembrances with us. I'm so sorry you didn't get a chance to say what you wanted to say to your loved one at the time, but maybe saying it now will have an impact for someone else. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
We will get to some of today's other top stories in just a moment, including an update on Harvard reckoning with how slavery profited the university, and a new abortion restriction in Oklahoma that is on its way to becoming law. Harvard is confronting its legacy of profiting from slavery. America's oldest university says it will spend $100 million to address this history. A report produced by Harvard faculty and students details the school's links to enslavement dating back to its founding in the 1600s. Today, the university's president explained how it would address its past. NBC's Tremaine Lee has more from our Washington bureau. Hey, Tremaine.
Joshua, after yesterday's report detailed the deep entanglement between Harvard as an institution and the institution of slavery, today there was a day-long symposium with thinkers and academics and historians from Harvard, but also other universities across the country, to speak to how colleges and universities not only benefited from the slave trade and slave labor and benefactors who engage in the practice of buying and selling human beings, that there is a time now to change things, to make amends. Over and over again throughout today's program, you kept hearing the word repair. Repair, repair, repair. A sense of healing some wounds that this institution, by way of not only enslaving people on their campuses, but also having their faculty, staff, some of the leaders in their fields, really propagating racial pseudoscience and myth that further not only subjugated black people, but helped codify and solidify white supremacy, but also black inferiority. Now, President Lawrence Bacow of Harvard University spoke to that moral responsibility to do something now. Let's take a listen.
No one, I would hope, would conclude that Harvard is solely responsible for where this nation finds itself at the moment, or maybe even primarily responsible. But I believe, because of our past, we bear a moral responsibility to act. This is our responsibility to try and shape a better future, to respond to practices which, candidly, we helped to perpetuate, as this report so carefully documents.
This is our responsibility, he said. Now, I've been talking with students from the campus, especially generational African-American students, those who descend from enslaved people. We should not forget that the majority of black people on Harvard's campus are not generational African-Americans. The vast majority are either first or second generations immigrants from Africa or the Caribbean. But this organization says this is a great start, right? But they want a little more. This is a great first step, but they want to hear more explicit efforts aimed at balancing the population here and actually reaching those descendants of enslaved people. Now, Harvard, for its part, said they're pledging $100 million to further research the legacy of slavery on their campus, to make inroads to communities that are filled with people who descend from enslaved people, but also creating academic opportunities with HBCUs. Now, again, Lawrence Bacow and the Harvard University team say, they're leaving things kind of vague because they want room to continue to grow, but this is a great first step. Joshua?
Thank you, Tremaine. That's NBC's Tremaine Lee with the latest from Harvard. Oklahoma could soon outlaw abortions after 6 weeks gestation, before many women even know they're pregnant. Yesterday, the Oklahoma Heartbeat Bill passed the state legislature. It now awaits a signature from Republican Governor Kevin Stitt. If he signs it, the ban would take effect immediately. This month, Governor Stitt signed another abortion ban into law. It makes the procedure a felony. That bill will not take effect until later this summer.
I promised Oklahomans that I would sign every pro-life bill that hit my desk. We want Oklahoma to be the most pro-life state in the country. We want to outlaw abortion in the state of Oklahoma.
This heartbeat bill follows a similar bill in Texas that led to more women seeking abortion care in Oklahoma, just north of Texas. Before the Texas ban went into effect, about 40 women a month were traveling there for the procedure. Afterward, The state provided abortions to 243 Texans just in October. A number of Oklahoma's clinics have already stopped scheduling abortions in anticipation of this bill passing. Like Texas, the Oklahoma ban lets private citizens sue abortion providers or anyone who helps a woman obtain an abortion for up to $10,000. The gender pay gap is getting more attention nowadays, thanks partly to the pandemic. Now there is more pressure to finally close it. A new study from the University of Wisconsin reveals just how big the disparities are, especially for women of color. NBC's Jolene Kent has more.
Frankie Robertson's work advocating for Black and brown mothers has given her a front row seat to many of the pressures put on families in this pandemic.
I'm the mom of two. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. I am married.
Pressures that often hit close to home, from inflation to taking care of her children while working.
How do you handle it on a psychological and emotional level as you're trying to spin all of these plates?
Wow. First, let me say that psychologically and emotionally, it's been very difficult. The mom guilt is so real.
But Frankie considers herself lucky.
Even with that, there's a great deal of privilege that socioeconomically we are at a certain place. There are so many people who they don't even have a living wage to even get started, to even talk about cutting back.
This reality is reflected in new data from the University of Wisconsin's Population Health Institute.
On average, an adult with 2 children would need to earn about $35.80 in order to meet their basic needs, things like paying for rent, adequate food, transportation, internet, and taxes. Yet we know that that is far higher than what most people are actually making.
That living wage far outpaces the federal minimum wage, currently $7.25 an hour. The report indicating economic security is out of reach for many women, due in part to persisting gender pay gap.
Women are earning about 80 cents on the dollar. And when we break it down by racial and ethnic groups, we can see that Latina women, for example, are having to work almost 299 more days in order to earn the same salary as a white man in a comparable job. Black women would have to work just about 7 more months, 222 days to reach that same salary.
Childcare is a major issue, with one report saying the average cost is more than $10,000 a year.
We know that about 25% of a family with 2 children's income is going to pay for childcare, which is much higher than the 7% of income that the federal government suggests we spend.
As for raising the minimum wage, some conservatives and business organizations say the added cost is expensive and may lead to increased unemployment. However, for those shocked by the statistics, Robertson says it's time to take action.
Use your influence, use your privilege, use your connection to reach out to policymakers who basically can change these things.
That's NBC's Jolene Kent reporting. If you wanted to get a dog, which breed's temperament is right for you? Before you answer, you might want to check out a new research project. It's kind of like a non-profit 23andMe for pets. New research on the DNA of a dog's personality before we go. In some ways, dogs are like people. They come in all shapes and sizes and personalities, and like us, looks can be deceiving, especially when it comes to temperament. For example, take America's most popular breed, the Labrador Retriever. He's so cute. They're renowned for being outgoing and affectionate. Consider pit bulls. Those dogs have a reputation in some circles as dangerous, aggressive, and unpredictable, but equally cute. Of course, pit bull lovers will tell you bad dogs come from bad owners. And there are plenty of horror stories about Labradors. I could tell you a few. But now, a new study calls our stereotypes about breeds into question. All of them. According to the citizen science project Darwin's Ark, a dog's breed dictates only 9% of its behavior. 9%. The study compiled more than 18,000 survey responses from dog owners and saliva samples from about 2,000 dogs. The researchers sequenced the dog's DNA, kind of like a canine 23andMe. Let's discuss the results with a senior author of the study. Dr. Eleanor Carlson is a professor of bioinformatics at the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School and the Broad Institute. Professor Carlson, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So 9%, huh? Break down those findings a little bit more. How did you reach that number? And then what's the other 91%?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as a scientist, I'm going to be really annoying and say we're still working on the other 91%.
That's not annoying.
No.
That's honest. I actually appreciate you saying you don't know yet, but go ahead.
Yeah, so we got into all of this work many, many years ago when we were actually interested in studying something called compulsive disorder in dogs, because I work at institutions that are interested in human health. And we kept on getting stuck because we were studying this disorder, but we didn't have enough dogs in our study. And one day I ran into somebody leaving work and they kind of asked, what do you do? And I was like, dog genomics. And they did exactly the same thing that everybody else does every time I tell them what I do. And that is that they pulled out their phone, showed me a picture of their dog, and started telling me all about their dog. And that was when I got this idea. I was like, I should not be having this problem that I don't have enough dogs signed up for my research. Everybody wants to tell me about them. And so we set up that project and actually just asked people to come to our website and tell us all about their dogs. And it won't surprise anybody that this was very successful. People do love to talk about their dogs. And we had so many dogs signed up that we could actually take on this question that I've been curious about for a while, which is, we knew that the breeds looked really different, but I wasn't totally convinced that their behavior was that different.
Yeah, and also I love the idea behind this survey, because we've been breeding dogs for a very, very long time, but we haven't had the kind of genetic understanding of dogs that we have now for very long. So I imagine that as this research continues, there may be a lot of revelations in terms of what we thought we knew just kind of from the outside. And then once you start to kind of genotype things, what that reveals.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the really exciting things about being involved in science right now. I always tell students in my group, that one of the fantastic things about being involved in genomics is that we're not going to run out of questions anytime soon. We're just starting to scratch the surface of what we can discover by actually looking at the DNA of individual dogs. And I think that was what we really wanted to do, was rather than putting dogs into categories and into groups defined by these breeds, which are actually not very old, they're only about 150 years old, we wanted to actually be able to study dogs as individuals.
Talk more about Darwin's Ark and the goals of this, the idea behind crowdsourcing science, this idea of citizen science behind learning about animals.
Yeah, so the complicated thing about studying something like behavior, as I think probably most people can appreciate, is it's what we call in science a complex trait. And that means that it's controlled, first of all, by many, many different genes and changes in many, many different genes, but it's also really heavily influenced by your environment. Your maternal environment, your early puppyhood, whether you've had traumatic events, who you're living with, all that kind of things. And that makes it really difficult to study. And the way we overcome things that are really, really difficult to study when you study genetics is to get really, really big sample sizes. And it works beautifully. And it's been proven very successful. Companies like 23andMe have shown that over and over again. And so we wanted to be able to take that approach that they were using in people and actually bring it over to the dog world. And so we set up this project, Darwin's Ark. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know we're just short on time. I did want to ask you more about some of the research you're doing before our time is up. I see on your site that there is a project regarding working dogs. There's a project regarding dogs and cancer. How do people get involved with this if they'd like to be part of the project?
Yeah, so anybody can come to our website and sign up. It's an open data project, so we work with all other scientists to try and make dog science better. And we have a number of different projects on there. If you go in and sign up your dog, you can sign them up for any of these projects, the Cancer Project, the Working Dog Project. And basically, we're trying to figure out what we can actually learn from our dogs in terms of helping both them, but also helping human health problems as well.
What is your expectation? And again, I appreciate that you said you don't yet know, but are there any early indications in terms of how much owners affect their dog's behavior? I know some people who say, well, I just want this kind of breed and I'm just going to love them and train them the best that I can and we'll just make it work. What is your best hypothesis in terms of how much we actually do control the outcomes of how our dogs behave?
Yeah, so the 9% was the part that we showed was explained by breed, but there's actually a lot to genetics other than breed. And I think overall we came up with about 25 to 50% of most of the traits that we were looking at in this study seem to be controlled by genetics. So that leaves another, at least half of it controlled by the owners and the dog's world and the dog's, puppyhood.
Can I just say, this has absolutely nothing to do with our conversation, but the video that we're running on the screen next to you, we are all having a very good time looking at these very happy dogs. The dog in the sand, I don't know if you saw the one, the Labrador who was just on his back, yes, having a wonderful time. He is my new role model. I want to learn to be, yep, that's him. I love sand and sand loves me. It's perfect. That is the life that I want to live. Professor Eleanor Carlson from UMass Chan Medical School. Best of luck with the science. I appreciate you making time for us. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
And with that, your weekend may begin. You and your furry friends may follow us online for the latest on upcoming topics and guests. We're at NBC Now Tonight on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Leave us a brief but brilliant voicemail, 888-575-2NBC, or email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Go throw the Frisbee with the dog, and we'll see you Monday. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.